Thank you, everybody. I'm very appreciative of the invitation to be here. Can everybody see my screen? Great. So I am the director of the USC Latino Alumni Association, and I'm here to talk about academic scholarships. This work is very personal to me as a first generation student, and I also just completed my doctorate at USC and took the opportunity to really focus, thank you, on looking at the impact that these scholarships have because there isn't consistency and really understanding some what outcomes we are actually providing. And so today I'll share a little bit about some of my findings, and then you'll also have an opportunity to hear from two current students as an example to show that while this is really information on students attending public four-year universities, the impact of academic scholarships is something that really needs to be looked at and supported because the benefits are obviously there, as the students will attest and some of the work will show. So let's start off with like the landscape. In terms of first generation students, it's clear that there's differences not only in the experience that they have when they are at an institution of higher education, but also in the experiences that they bring with them. And these are very important when you're talking about culturally competent education, pedagogy, because it impacts their ability to persist. You know, it's about 34% of students are first generation students, which is a significant population. However, their academic outcomes are not the same as those that are continuing generation. As you will see, about 90% are not on track towards graduation after a 6-year period of time, which is usually how universities and colleges measure the graduation rate or report their graduation rate. Fewer, even at the 3-year track, they're not on, at the 3-year mark, they're not on track towards graduation. And I think the alarming thing is that the graduation rates would almost need to triple for them to be on par with those of non-Latino whites or continuing generations. So it's definitely, as many programs as are available, there's still a lot of work to be done in this area. So in terms of academic scholarships, what are they? And as I shared, one of the things that is challenging is that there aren't consistencies. There's a lot of programs like mentorship programs and others that are scholarship programs, and then these are offered in various combinations, but there isn't a clear definition of what an academic scholarship is. In a nutshell, I think they all attempt to provide financial, social, cultural capital to students and support their persistence either in combination or individually, but there isn't a true definition or best practice approach in terms of what comprises an academic scholarship program. So that is problematic. And so we're going to look at a little bit about what type of programming is usually offered by academic scholarship programs, what value students find and how do they use this academic scholarship programming, and then what value the students themselves perceive. And I think most importantly, how do these programs evaluate success for students? Because that is also different. Before I talk a little bit about the theoretical frameworks, I'll just share that I was able to collect surveys from students at 12 public universities across Southern California. So it was a good data sample to really show that these are conditions that apply to students all over. I'm having trouble hearing. Oh, sorry, that was my iWatch. There's a lot of conditions that are not just to, one geographic location because it might be lower income. It is something that is applicable throughout Southern California, regardless of what university students are attending. And I will share that a lot of this information is also resonating with me at USC, where we do have a lot of students that are first generation low income as well. So in terms of the lens that we use to look at this, we use Yosso's critical race theory. And I'm sure some of you have learned or heard about critical race theory, but in terms of this work, we really looked at it as taking race in all aspects of the research process. And for us, we really focused on the experiential knowledge of students, the experiences that they have had, and really taking a cultural lens, a race lens in terms of these academic outcomes. And that'll make sense a little bit more in terms of how we use that. and then Bourdieu's social capital, which are really, the skills, the resources and assets that you have access to as a result of your family, your family's assets, your family's wealth, and the network that you have, which are really critical when you're looking at higher education and you might be the first in your family to attend and come from a low income background. So obviously those are important. So it was interesting to combine these two. And in my work, this hasn't really been a traditional way. This is a new way that these two theories are being looked at, and looking at race and social capital, because social capital you usually think of just money and not necessarily all the other assets that students bring. So in terms of, a literature review, typical characteristics of a first generation Latino student. They tend to be less prepared than continuing generation students. And I'm going to turn to look at some statistics. They are, says 43% more likely to take at least one remedial course. They are facing challenges due to being away from home for the first time, and difficulties coupled with the lack of social cultural capital that they come with. It is definitely a different population. Financial difficulties, the majority of students qualify for financial assistance. However, we know that tuition increases every year and financial assistance is not rising at the same levels that the cost of education is, or the cost of living for that matter, is going. And they were more likely to work 20 or more hours while being in school. So these are real differences. Culturally, it's important to note that, as Latinos, the idea of family and community is very important. So when these students go to an educational system that values independence, where it's competition and independence and what you are going to do for yourself, that may be not in line with the reasons why they are pursuing higher education. There was a lot of mention of, really helping family, and that is really not the traditional way that we look at education and that is supported. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, right? And there's almost like an identity crisis. They call it cultural mismatch theory, where the identity of that individual comes into question because that's not really why I'm here, and I don't know how to succeed in this system, and I don't really fit at home because now I have this information. So that is also challenging. But what is really important to me was for us to also know that these students possess capital. It's not just about the things that they don't have, which is really how a lot of research is taken into account. Students possess capital. We grow up in a system of networks. And so for culturally, relationship building and turning to the people that we know for information is something that comes very naturally. And that is social capital. That is a social capital that we bring with us, being resourceful, that we really don't hear about in research. And it's really important to keep that in mind, because students are not coming from a place of having no capital. They bring capital, they just don't call it social capital. And it's not really a system of we're here to save them and give them this information because they don't have any resources. They bring with them resources. It's teaching them a language. It's teaching them the additional information that they just don't have access to. In terms of factors that influence persistence, obviously the lack of social capital. If you have families that haven't attended any higher institution here in the United States, it's a very different educational system. They don't have the ability to learn how to navigate the FAFSA process, the application process, right? They just, within their families and networks, don't typically have that. Financial capital is also an issue. There was a statement that really resonated with me, the majority of us first generation students were sons and daughters of families who work in low paying jobs. That is really the reality. Families that work really hard, but because you may be a new immigrant, or you're first generation here, our families are worried about how to make ends meet, right? So there isn't the ability to plan and save for college. It's not a matter of desire, it's a matter of ability. And then really not, no way to plan for college. And then sense of belonging, it's interesting because one of the things, and I will share a little bit more as we progress, what students quickly learn that there are differences between them and continuing generation students, whether that's in financial capital, the resources that they have, where they have family members that can help support their search for internships, or just really helping them, figure out what major to pursue. Um, and this obviously results in a sense of not belonging when everybody else seems to have it figured out and I don't. It really impacts their ability to persist, or their ability to even believe in themselves, that they can persist when it's such a foreign system. So, in terms, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but in terms of like the study, we actually conducted interviews, with 5 students to get a better understanding. But we sent out surveys. We sent out 139 surveys, got responses for 70 of them. So we had about a 51% participation rate, which was a really good rate, and really happy that we had data from students from 12 different institutions. Um, the interviews were open-ended and really allowed us to really get some depth into what some of the responses were, because the students participated in the survey, and then from those we were able to identify students that were willing to also be interviewed. So it gave us good data to really compare and understand and add meaning to some of the numbers that we had. So what's the nature of the programming provided by some of these academic scholarships? And as I shared, there is inconsistency in terms of what an academic scholarship is and what is offered. But first and foremost, what was mentioned by almost half of all participants was scholarships and the financial piece. And that is really what gets a lot of them in the door, looking for ways to cover the cost of education. Professional development. And this was also an area that was mentioned by 41% of students, a significant population, and another motivator for them to apply for the educational scholarship, because they focus on skill building and acquisition of knowledge that they previously didn't possess. And those were the areas that, the programming is offered. But it was real skill building, and then also goal setting around what major, academically, study abroad opportunities, professionally. The other piece was social support and really just meeting other students that, like themselves, maybe first generation low income, and then mentors, right? Like either alumni from the academic scholarship program that have sort of, been there and done that and have been, can be role models of success for them. That was also very valuable. Academic resources, and there was an area of disconnect here, because a lot of the academic scholarship programs offer programming themselves. So there's a need to encourage students to access what's available to them. At USC, we have the Engelman Student Health Center with a lot of mental health resources, and that's people get referred there, but not necessarily to the Korchak Center where there's tutoring. And so thinking of those things that are available to them when an institution. And then, as I mentioned, an opportunity to meet other first generation students. One of the things that I talked about was when we looked at the critical race theory lens, that was interesting and very problematic actually for me was, if you have heard of like code switching, a lot of these programs are really focused on what we call dominant forms of social capital, right? So learning how to dress for success, how to, interview, how to be prepared for social capital in the typical ways that we think of it. So I'm going to read this because I think this was really interesting to me and really important for everyone to consider that is thinking of a mentorship program or helping students that may be first generation. It says, when I'm interacting with someone that I don't know or someone important, they know that I can pretty much speak the same language, linguistically, but I mean like modeling which gestures and word choice I use. I think that is one of the biggest things that they help me with professionally, to get to know how to work my way around the system and how to manage it. So this is one of a couple of different quotes that were shared. I think we need to be careful because we still need to showing students that they need to change and be different, in order to be successful and to have the social capital. And I think it's important to note that what we need to do is really tailor that social capital to show students that they don't need to change. There's different, obviously you have to dress differently if you're going into a business meeting, but really putting some framework around it so that it's not you need to change who you are, because then you're thinking of it as a deficit, right? Like there's something wrong with you. And so there was, almost like I need to do that code switching, right? And I think you need to put some frame around that, and again, not come from a perspective of like we're here to kind of save these people who don't really know how to, you know, be in a professional setting. Like we need to teach them those things. So really, I think be able to talk to students. And one of the other things that was mentioned was for some of our Afro Latinos, you know, how are girls supposed to wear their hair? Am I supposed to wear it up? Am I supposed to wear it down? And I think those are things that are all important when we're talking about that social capital. You know, they're very real concerns, I think, that we need to keep in mind. In terms of how do students um, utilize the programming, it was interesting, and I think in like ways that are not to, you know, unexpected, in help transitioning to school and really understanding the academic demands of being a college student, right? They don't have the ability to have that information from their network and parents and family, but the academic scholarship programs through mentors and through the programming itself, we're able to help them understand what it means to be a college student, how to study, how to ask for resources and office hours. Um, Part of the work that also resulted in this is just self confidence, right? From the skills that they had acquired, knowing what it's like to go to office hours and what I'm supposed to ask. Going to the study abroad office to learn about study abroad opportunities and really accessing what you have. But I think overall, like this resulted in being helping students be able to persist because of their motivation and then validating their experiences as a first generation student. Obviously, the financial piece through the scholarship, and then mentors and institutional agents, which are individuals at their university or college that can really help them understand what it's like to be successful as a first generation student and be a mentor to them. How do first generation students view the value of this? What is it that they see as valuable? And the majority of students, more than half, mentioned learning about the expectations and demands of being college students, just learning how to be a college student, what that means, how to be one successfully, even, you know, learning how to study and the academic demands, time management. The other one was remaining in school full time, and this one was around the financial piece. The scholarship helped them not have to work two jobs or not have to work the typical 20 hours that a significant proportion of first generation college students are forced to work. And some academic scholarship programs, including ours, actually even have exceptional funding. So if you need professional attire or if you need to travel to a conference, we can help support, and some of the other programs also support things that are going to help them be successfully professionally and academically, but don't fall within a typical financial aid package. So sometimes they're stuck and not able to pursue those things because the capital, the financial piece is missing. And then identifying future career goals. I think it really helped by exposing them to different industries, exposing them to mentors, other first generation students in, or alumni in different industries that could serve as role models and also help them, you know, learn about what it's like culturally in a corporate setting, what it's like to work in a particular industry, and the career path that they had taken in order for students to also consider and really figure out and see themselves in each of these different places. So I think these are all to be expected, and similar to what we find at USC in the program that I work with, you know, the same types of opportunities for student support, and then also some of the same benefits that students have expressed. And then what value, excuse me, how is success measured? And I think this is also different. But there's a rhyme and a reason behind all of this. So it's interesting because all students are required to maintain full-time status. And I think students don't understand what these requirements are or why these are requirements. And that was a big piece. And I think all academic scholarships need to be intentional about is really communicating the why to the programming. Um, you know, full-time status to make sure that we get them through to graduation by that 6-year mark and put the pieces around that to support their academic success to enable them to be full-time students. And obviously through the financial piece, maintaining a minimum grade point average. And for us and for most scholarships, that's a 3.0. And that's because a lot of companies require a 3.0 if you're going to be applying for an internship. So putting the professional development piece around that, but also the academic support, if it's tutoring or other support that student needs, participating in the academic and professional workshops. And that's where they meet those institutional agents and mentors that they could turn to. And then the career services at their university, to really get them set up with access to mock interviews, get them access to resume review and the types of things that are important and available to them, but they may not necessarily seek out on their own for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's, I think, a little bit of lack of knowledge that they need to do these services or that they're available to them, but also just we don't know what we don't know sometimes. So these are all the requirements. Again, important for students to understand the why behind them and really intentionally be able to communicate with students why you need these things. So in terms of implications, and after this, we'll have the ability to listen to hear from two of our current scholars. There definitely is evidence to support, and I think you'll hear from the students too, that academic scholarships do support the persistence of students, and not just at four-year universities. I think some of the work that we do and some of the students will share how it supported them. Obviously, a need to really strategize and figure out what an academic scholarship that is successful looks like and really put some structure around that so we can have best practices and replicate that. It did show, that regardless of all the programs that we have, a lot of our first generation students are still facing some of the same challenges that I faced when I was in undergrad 20 years ago, right? Less social capital, less financial capital, cultural mismatch and trying to figure out where I fit. I don't necessarily fit at home anymore because I now have this knowledge that's encouraging me to be independent, but I don't fit here because I'm here to help my family. So a lot of those things are um, still in place. And then while it did show that it did support the acquisition of social capital, that is really a call to action, right? Because currently we are doing what Estela Ben Simone, who is with USC and is amazing, she calls single loop learning. Right now, this is a band-aid on a system, right? There is a need to look at culturally relevant pedagogy, to take cultural matters into consideration when you're looking at best practices, because right now we are putting the onus on the student and we're educating student about the capital that they need to acquire, but not necessarily doing a lot of work within universities to advocate so that as an institution they are thinking about these things and supporting students, right? Like the student shouldn't be the only one responsible for making changes. The university also needs to meet students sort of where they are, and that is obviously not something just for Latino students, but all students of color and underrepresented students. So now I would love for you to hear from a couple of our scholars who have graciously agreed to share their experience and hear about their experience as a scholar in an academic scholarship program. And I will let them introduce themselves, but I would love for Luis Thun to share a little bit about his experience and sort of the great things that he's doing, as really someone that is, hitting it out of the ballpark. Luis?
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Thun. I'm currently a rising senior studying political science at the University of Southern California. I'm also going to be a first year master's student studying communication data science as well. Currently, I'm in Salt Lake City, so I'm originally from California. I'm interning at Goldman Sachs, which is a financial investment banking company, doing human capital management, so HR. To talk a little bit more about, like Rosie has said, I think for me, growing up in a very like low income community surrounded with a lot of high income individuals in a suburban area of Thousand Oaks, it was definitely difficult to navigate, especially going into a space where there are predominantly white as well as affluent students. And I think being able to have scholarships that not only supported me financially, but also academically and professionally have been such a big factor in where I've gone. Being part of the Latino Alumni Association specifically, I've gained mentors as well as exposure to different careers. my parents' like highest level of education. My mom, she finished some high school, and my dad finished up to middle school. So growing up in a very immigrant community, I was always taught I had two career paths. So either becoming a doctor or a lawyer. Crossed out being a doctor in high school, and then I tried doing the law school type of track within college, and I realized it really wasn't for me. And I think, having a mentor, someone that's also first generation, within the Latino Alumni Association has been so helpful, not only because they've given me advice navigating the space for my specific background, but also, giving me advice from their own perspective in a career going into that professional world has been such an impactful experience as well. And it has helped me not only grow professionally and connect. And I think, being at a university where the culture of a lot of individuals have parents that have gone into that industry has been a little bit, it's felt like I felt behind at times. Having someone like that through an academic scholarship has made me, know my merit, but also knowing where I belong and exploring different career paths. I don't honestly think I would have gone into Goldman Sachs with, a very selective process where there's only 40 interns out of hundreds of thousands of applicants, without having that confidence built through the scholarship and, knowing about mentorship. I remember working like weeks on weeks on getting my resume help with my mentor, prepping for my interviews, and getting that support was so helpful in going in. And because I've gotten that support from the mentor as well from the academic scholarship and being at like USC as an institution, going into the workplace, I feel like I am confident enough to be able to advocate for what are my needs and needs of other students that are not capable of advocating for themselves, and really knowing that I'm capable of doing the work that needs to be done to succeed at an institution like that as well.
Thank you so much, Luis. I appreciate you sharing. And then I will put my contact information on the screen. And our last scholar that I would love for you to hear is Patrick Valadez. And I look forward to chatting more with each of you and answer any questions in the breakout room. Thank you, Luis and Patrick.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Patrick Valdez, and as was mentioned throughout this presentation, I am one of the first generation college students that was graciously provided with the Latino Alumni Scholarship at USC. I recently graduated this past year with my bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and now I have the opportunity to work full time with the Boeing company in the defense sector, while also working part time on a master's degree in aerospace engineering through the progressive degree program. These are all accomplishments that I'm very proud of, but I know for sure that I couldn't reach these goals alone. Growing up in a household that had two parents that only had at the highest education was high school, I had to go through a lot of these application processes on my own. And high school only teaches you so much. But I know that through the scholarship from the Latino Alumni Association, it provided me with an opportunity to not only attend USC financially, but it also provided me with the support network that I needed to thrive in college. And now I want to start off with a couple examples that kind of highlight my points here. For example, my first semester in college, I took an Introduction to Flight Mechanics course where we were tested weekly with quizzes. And, coming out of high school, I was under the impression all you had to do was memorize a bunch of information and just regurgitate that into a page on quiz day. Well, that really wasn't the case. I walked into that test, my very first quiz of college, and I bombed it because I was completely blindsided by the fact that engineering school is meant to teach you how to think critically and not just memorize a bunch of equations and formulas. And I immediately went over to Mercy and Dolores's office that day, and I remember just going to them and just very emotional, talking about how engineering school isn't as easy as Viterbi made it sound during our orientation. And during the interaction, Dolores and Mercy actually challenged me to be strong and embrace everything and embrace all these challenges thrown at me. And long story short, I was able to graduate top of that class, one of the top three. And this is a class where 40% of my peers dropped out that first semester and changed majors. So I thought that was one of the first few testaments. And now looking toward the pandemic season, with everyone being at home and at school online, I wanted to take a few steps in the new direction. I wanted to learn more about finance. And being an engineer, I figured that numbers wouldn't be too hard to grasp, but I really didn't understand where to start with the concepts. And one of the opportunities that the LA also provided were weekly different alumni classes where alumni would come and speak to us about different topics. And in this case, it happened to be finance. And I emailed Mercy that day and asked her if she would be willing to connect me with one of the teachers at the Finance 101 course. And immediately she threw me on the email the next morning and had me mentoring with two of these great financial gurus in the industry. And that was one of the biggest opportunities that I was able to grasp during this pandemic season. Now, I could continue on with other stories that I had about these monthly meetings where I learned a lot of different things outside of the financial generosity of the LAA. But I know we're running short on time, and I just wanted to say thank you, Mercy, for all of the help you provided me with these past 4 years. I know we'll continue chatting a lot throughout the future, and I know working at Boeing is going to be a lot smoother after learning everything I have from the Latino Alumni Association. So thank you.
Thank you, Luis and Patrick, and thank you everybody for your time today.